Hey folks, this is Steve with Nonprofit Ally, and I am on the Zoom. Actually, we're doing a video chat here with Michael Rivera. He is the CEO of Jee Foods, and that's spelled J-E-E. It's a small startup nonprofit in Hamilton, Ohio that is completely student-run. For those looking at the video, probably realize that that Michael definitely looks younger. He is a junior at Ross High School. And their mission, well, what they do and part of their mission is they collect donated goods and process food, and they serve low-cost meals to help starve out hunger and break the cycle of poverty. Folks, visit their website at Jee Foods. Remember, that's J-E-E, foods.com. And Michael, I am so glad to have you on the show.
Well, Steve, I'm happy to be here.
Well, cool. So correct anything if I said something wrong in that intro.
No, that's spot on.
Perfect. So let's just get right into this. You are a student-run nonprofit. Just how did that start? Who had the idea? And then how did you learn to start a nonprofit? And then we'll talk about where you are in that process too.
Okay. So last November of 2017, my IT teacher, Mr. Thomas O'Neill, he was approached by Samsung Global. Mr. O'Neill, he's been in touch with Samsung through a variety of competitions that his student companies have been in. And Samsung, what they tried to do was start a pilot program, the Global Classroom STEAM Challenge. And we were one of 8 high schools globally, 4 domestic and 4 international. Steve, would it be okay if I just, if I let my dog out real fast? He seems to be making some noise.
Yeah, go for it. I have dogs too.
Sorry.
Okay, so you're talking about how it got introduced to you, and so go ahead and continue.
Okay, so like I was saying, Samsung approached Mr. O'Neill and invited our IT class to participate in the Global Classroom STEAM Challenge, which we were a pilot school. We were one of 8 schools globally. We were one of the 4 schools in the United States invited. And what we were tasked to do, what all the schools were in charge of, were coming up to assign solutions to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We were given SDG 1 and 2, no poverty and zero hunger. And so we were partnered with a school in Busan, South Korea. And we were tasked with coming up with an environmentally friendly, a sustainable solution to hunger and poverty that could be applied on a global scale. And so we were just thinking of ideas. And in fact, one of our Jee Foods came around when our current CFO and CMO and myself, we were after school conversing. We were curious as to if a nonprofit could actually make money. And we thought of the idea for Jee Foods. And the whole sort of background for Jee Foods sort of comes from, and our name especially comes from, the 3 factors that we found most impacted hunger and poverty, those being jobs, the lack thereof, education, and economy. And so those 3 factors sort of combined and they sort of meshed together. And that's where we came up with our ideas and our solution and our day-to-day business operations.
So you came up with this model and then you applied it locally, and this is a model that could possibly be done internationally, globally?
Absolutely. I think when we designed Jee Foods, we had to make sure that it could be applied on a global scale. And we wanted to design Jee Foods to be effective wherever there is food being wasted and wherever there is a need for education, which everyone can always be educated, and I'm sure that there are hungry people worldwide, and we know that to be a fact.
Right. So then by establishing this, you're establishing goals, you're tracking this, you're doing some objectives with this, you have a plan for this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of our first goals, just a side note, Mr. O'Neill, he's very educated when it comes to business aspects. That's one of the main reasons we are able to succeed to the point where we are right now. He advised us on a lot of things, and one of the main things that he helped us with was establishing that basic credibility and the sort of the foundation for all businesses. As far as our planning and strategic roles, we made sure to have bylaws, a business plan, future goals, projected financials, all of those basic company aspects we made sure to incorporate before we actually started getting investments in terms of company equipment and in terms of marketing our idea itself.
Right. So you obviously had a plan here. You did some research, so there's a few things going on here, and this is all while we should let folks know that you've only recently applied for your 501c3, and yet you're already providing some of these services.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's what I think some people get confused on, is that they think they have to wait for that 501c3, and that's not actually true. So what you're doing is right in line with everything. And you have a business plan and financial statements, if I'm correct, already going on, and you've only just recently applied for your 501. So you're very well organized. So give us an idea. The credibility, I love that topic. And I think that's something that regardless of what they're doing, what service they're providing, or their age or their location, if you're new, you have to establish credibility. And I think once we see what you're doing with your nonprofit, like the business plan and your financials and your bylaws, I think people are going to understand that that's probably, I'm assuming, part of the basis of your credibility.
Absolutely. I think that those founding documents especially are just incredibly crucial for establishing any sort of credibility whatsoever. Those are the building blocks in your business pyramid, and without solid documents like bylaws and reports and financial statements, you're not going to have much of a top left.
All right. Hey, why don't you walk us through this? Tell us how, when you got this idea, you're starting out and you have to get this whole plan set out. You guys have an idea and you need to put it in action. And if this is the time to share the screen, maybe we can go that route too.
I'll get to the screen in just a moment.
Okay.
But so when we were originally, like a week or two after we come up with the idea for these things, the first thing that we were advised to do by Mr. Neal was to lay out a business plan, and that's exactly what we did. What we drafted was, actually, I'll go ahead and pull it up.
I like that you are talking about this. I think people that run nonprofits don't realize that business plans are for them too. And you also mentioned something earlier. You were wondering if nonprofits could make money. So maybe you can help us answer that question too.
And so my standard response for can nonprofits make money is technically no, but the kind of money by making money in air quotes that most people are referring to is, can the employees and the owners and operators make money? The answer to that is absolutely. By making money as an owner, operator, as an executive within a nonprofit, that being paid there is a reinvestment into the company. Nonprofits are considered nonprofit because they don't have investors, they don't pay dividends, that sort of financial aspect. But nonprofits are without a doubt able to reinvest money back in the company, and in fact, that's what they're designed to do. And paying employees, including upper level management, is absolutely legal.
Absolutely. So I'm going to explain for folks who might be just listening to the podcast and not watching this. We are looking at the executive summary actually the business plan for Jee Foods, and he's pulled it up. It's on it's a Google Doc, and it's entitled. There's an executive summary, and there's parts of this, and I imagine that we're about to go through this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the crucial things that you're going to need in a business plan is just a variety of just every single thing that your business will encompass. So there should be an executive summary, which basically goes over everything that the company is, what the company will do, that sort of aspect, its plans, its goals. Following that, I just used a standard template, which is available online. Not in any specific order, but a general outline would be the company, what the company is, what they do, and why they're doing it. So I outlined here 1.1 is Jee Foods mission, and like Steve had said earlier, we're trying to eliminate the hunger crisis starting in the greater Cincinnati area and with goals to expand globally. After that, we touch on our objectives, what we're doing, some of our long-term goals, and then we start to go into a huge aspect of what the business plan and how credibility is established with our organizational summary. And so this I'll come back to a little bit later. This is actually one of the bullet points I had on my outline for this podcast. But the organizational summary is something that a lot of outside people will look directly for. And what the organizational summary will do for you is it will outline exactly who is doing what and the plans, the future plans for that organization in terms of employment and who is operating it. And so here we have in the organizational summary, Jee Foods will be managed by a collective group of young adults from Ross High School who are educated on the process of a business and possess qualities that are highly sought after of business management skills, such as critical thinking, logical processing of issues, communication skills, listening skills, the ability to learn from past experiences, and the ability to grow connections and relationships. And what this organizational summary does for you is it establishes not only credibility, but it shows outside people looking in who is going to be running the business.
Yeah. Hope I'm getting some feedback from your speakers, it sounds like. I just wrote that down. I put a big exclamation point next to it. The who part of this, like who is running this organization? Like how is this being run? And so right away you're establishing the criteria for the people that are going to be within your organization. That's great.
Absolutely. And so once we get past that main introduction, we go into a little bit about, so just ending the 1.x, that sort of area of the business plan. It sort of wraps up with the formation history and gives a little bit of a detailed past of how the company was formed and where it sort of comes from. After that, what I like to do with my business plan is go into the financials, talk about how, where we're getting the money from, where the projected expenses will be, and where all the money's going in layman's terms. And so graphs are absolutely welcomed here. There should be an accompanying, I'll show you where our spreadsheets are. There should be an accompanying, I like a 5-year projected financials. 3 years also adequate, but always planning ahead will be better. And you can see here we have very detailed income silos and expense silos, along with accompanying graphs, which will be found in the business plan.
So your business plan has this financial part involved in there, and then accompanying that, you have these addendums or these attachments, which are graphs. So right now we are just looking at Jee Foods financial projections for the next 5 years, actually laid out month to month in a spreadsheet.
Yes.
So very detailed. Okay.
Yeah. If you'd like, I can go over those. Would that be something we should do?
Really quick, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and we're going to switch back over to those spreadsheets. This is one thing I think people have a hard time doing when you start a nonprofit, because also when you do your if you do the 501EZ, not so much, but if you do the 501, if you do the 1023
EZ,
not the EZ, but the regular 1023, the projected stuff becomes even more important. But I think people have a hard time projecting their costs when they're just starting out. So give us the kind of bullet points of what's included in here and how you came up with these numbers.
Okay, so let's just take a look at 2019, for example. This is the year that we anticipate having everything going as we have it laid out in our business plan. So we have a detailed list of our income silos as well as monthly expenses. And so what we did was we broke down our income silos into, typically for a nonprofit, you're going to have grants as well as fundraisers. And then we go into the more specific company-oriented sources of income. For us, it'd be our food truck, composting goods that we cannot recycle, innovation and partnerships. That's another story on its own, as well as a restaurant, which we're very interested in starting. And so to come up with these numbers, we made very, very conservative estimates, making sure that we hit the low ball for all of them. And we didn't want to come out of the gates projecting goal amounts, goal sums for our grants and our fundraisers. So what we did was we assumed, for example, with the grants, in our area we have a lot of community foundations and outside sources who love to donate, and we feel that with those sources that all of these numbers estimated are a very, very reasonable estimate for our yearly totals. Going down to the expenses, going back on what I just said, that applies for all of the areas of income, just very reasonable estimates for income. Going down to the expenses, we were able to use current data. For example, with our, I'm sorry that the screen the trackpad on this computer is sort of touchy.
That's right. It's very clear. A little slow and choppy, but it's very clear. Everything's really obvious in here.
Okay. And so, for example, if we look at the fiscal year for 2019, our monthly expenses, what we did was we were able to look at previous data. For example, food truck, we just looked up typical costs for monthly operational expenses for a food truck. And what we did was for Jee Foods in the beginning, what we plan on operating 3 days a week, Monday or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which will be peak days for food truck operations. But what we did with our expenses are we projected them for full-time usage, 24 or not 24/7, but 40-hour work weeks with our expenses. So that sort of, like I mentioned earlier, gives you that buffer when it comes to expenses. That's also why some of our projected net profits will be a little bit lower. Some of the important monthly expenses a nonprofit should look at include, aside from your specific company-oriented expenses, you should include insurance. Without a doubt, any nonprofit, specifically in the food industry, is subject to a lot of scrutiny when it comes to the safety of the food that we're processing, as well as payroll. That's another huge thing. If you're planning on organizing a specific, like a volunteering system, or you're going to be an employee-only thing, that's something that you need to address, and then you need to factor into your expenses. And that's about it as far as our projecting incomes and expenses are for us.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly give this an overview for people who aren't looking at this. So it's a spreadsheet, and it's broken into income and expenses projected for what they're doing. And what Michael's done here is he's broken down his income into very typical things you'd expect, like grants and fundraisers, but also you have some social enterprise going on here. You actually have some products that you're producing, which would be your food truck and your compost. So some programs, I guess, that could fall under that are also helping pay, and in the future, a restaurant. I like the idea that you do very conservative costs. That's really good. And then monthly expenses, obviously you have the food truck in there, which is going to be part of your way to raise money, but it's also expense, and you included the insurance and the payroll and stuff like that. So well thought out. And so, folks, if you're watching the video, great. If you're studying a nonprofit and want to learn a way to project your cost, I would say, well, one, make sure you're listening, which you are, but also go watch this video. All right, so let's go back to that business plan. We've gone through the financials a bit. Okay, and so back to the business plan with our 2.x section. That just details what our finances look like, where our income's coming from, what our startup expenses are. We also go into a little bit about where our payroll expenses are coming from. One of the unique things that I like about Jee Foods, and especially nonprofits that are oriented toward helping those come out of poverty, is we projected our expenses so that all of our payroll is going to be above minimum wage. As you can see, if you're watching the video in our personnel, we include pay, which is well above the Ohio and national minimum wages, to help with the poverty aspect that we're trying to address. And that's something important that when you're trying to start a nonprofit, figuring out and deciding on the amounts of pay that you should be giving to your employees, depending on their position, their experience, and whatnot. After that, just go into some generic information, where we're located. This is where it also includes some of our SWOT analyses further down. We address our products and services, what we're doing, how we're doing it, who we're partnering with, where we're getting the goods from, how we're going to process them, and where they're going to go. When it comes to the market, we talk about who we're going to be serving, the numbers, the specifics, the percentages of people that are going to be considered food insecure, where we're going to be serving, the radius of our reach, and of course the details within all of these paragraphs are going to be specific on a company-to-company basis, but if you're watching the video, the underlined and bolded sections should all be consistent. For example, if you were to start a separate company, regardless of that company, you should always address the market and assess where you're at in terms of your customers. So part of what you put in here also is in like the market and stuff like that. You've done some market research. You've identified the need, right? And you put some numbers in there about how many people and what percent of them and how wide the radius is. So some good details in here, which shows as a business plan, would show anyone who wants to invest or anyone who wants to give a grant to your organization, just where the need lies and how much is needed. That's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. Then we go into a breakdown of our market segmentation. We talk about demographics, the people that we're getting. We do have some visuals accompanying this, but I do not believe that they are in the business plan just for space purposes. We talk about the demographics, the who is getting what, the age groups, the racial backgrounds, to sort of address and sort of define who we're helping, and B, when it comes to applying for grants, we're able to see more specifically who we need to target when applying for grants. So, for example, if there is a donor who is specific in helping the African American community, we would be able to show them percentage XYZ of our customers, percentage XYZ are African American, and that hopefully, for most nonprofits, will encourage that person to donate because we're helping a group that they are interested in. Oh no, the graphics aren't here. And so here, what you're seeing on the screen is just a population split within the Hamilton County, which is not where we're located, but it's downtown Cincinnati. This is where they do a lot more statistics and polling in Hamilton County, just because it's a more populated area. And we felt that it was appropriate to include that just because the Hamilton County area, it borders Butler County, which is where we're currently located. Going down a little bit further, we have our strategic and implementation summary. And this is another crucial thing when it comes to a business plan. If I were to be reviewing a business plan and I did not see this, it would immediately be a red flag for me. And the fact that it shows that they do not know where they're going or how they're going to do it.
Right. So far in the plan, you've kind of done the who you are, what you're going to do. You've put in there kind of the statistics, identifying the need for what you're going to do. But now we're coming into the how you're going to do it part. Like, hey, this is all great, but how are you going to make this happen? And I would imagine that this is a pretty key part.
Absolutely. So in our strategy and implementation summary, we focus on 3 aspects: our marketing, our finances, and our community aspect. And so here with our marketing strategy, we focus on being a student-run nonprofit, being pretty familiar with social medias. We focus on using social medias as well as brochures, flyers, other paper advertisements to help spread our name and spread our mission. Our partner organizations will also have the opportunity to display our information. Like I said, we're partnered with the Hamilton Community Foundation, and we have access to, they advertise not necessarily for us, but they have our name and our information on their website, and donors have access to that.
So real quick here, you just mentioned the Hamilton Community Foundation, and we didn't mention this just yet. We did mention that you're still in the process of getting your 501c3, but you are operational now. So some people might wonder, how does that work if you're getting donations? So as a side, could you tell us that relationship with the Hamilton Community Foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Hamilton Community Foundation is an area community foundation, just like the Cincinnati or the Middletown Community Foundation. And what they did for us is they gave us the opportunity to use their nonprofit tax ID, so we had the ability to apply for grants as well as seek out other forms of donations and partnerships that required that nonprofit aspect before we had the means to apply for our own nonprofit status. And so how we did that was I was personally associated with the Hamilton Community Foundation. I was a member in some of their youth groups there. And what I did was I just reached out to their vice president and told them our need and what we were looking for, and they were able to provide it for us. And they do that for, I believe, around 50 area nonprofits. The Hamilton area is only about 60,000 people, and having that many nonprofits being aided by the use of that tax ID is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I'll just follow up real quick on that. That's a really important thing to point out to anyone who's starting their nonprofit who doesn't have status yet and you want to start fundraising or even apply for grants. Those partnerships, they're not that difficult to get, especially if you have a personal relationship. Like there's not a lot of paperwork involved in there. It's at least when I did it, it was a simple ask and approval by their board and then a written agreement. And we were now, you're not really part of them, but you are under them so that you can use their tax ID. And it's a beautiful way to get started quickly if you're in the process of doing all this, but you want to get your boots on the ground. Well, cool, man. Let's keep going through this. Sorry about that sidetrack, but I think people might have been putting this together in their head like, well, wait a minute, aren't they still getting their 501? How are they doing this? And now they know.
Yeah, absolutely. That was very important to touch on. So we start going more into detail about our fundraising strategy, where we're going to get our funding from. We assess the value of our community donations, local grants, as well as government grants. Side note, that's a lot of the time I'll see nonprofits that won't go for government grants. They focus on local community grants. But government grants are incredible today. We just applied for the opportunity to serve area youth over the summer when school is out through a partnership with the Ohio Department of Education. We applied for, the right to serve these students lunch or meals during the day, where otherwise, without the school, they might not be able to get lunch. So those government grants are definitely not something you should not be skipping out on. Going more into some more of our projected finances. Another important thing that I'd like to mention, breaking it down not only on a yearly basis, but also a monthly basis. That's important too. And including some balance sheets. Here, some of our some of the bulk of the business plan comes in with a breakdown of our organizational summary, where we go into the details of our C-suite as well as our board of directors. And so what I like to include in here is maybe not necessary, but adds more of a personal touch. The responsibilities of, as shown on the screen, myself, and the credentials and plans of each C-suite member. And it just breaks down what each C-suite member is doing, their credentials, what they've been doing, where they're at. And this is another thing that sort of establishes credibility for the company, showing where the leadership is, where they've been, and what they're doing. Also a list of the board of directors there.
Right. So just for folks real quick, as we're going through this business plan, you have to realize this is 16 pages long. We're just over halfway through, and the last maybe a third of this is the C-suite. And you want to explain the C-suite for people who aren't, that's a business term more than a nonprofit term in some sense, but that's your chiefs, basically?
Yeah. So for example, our C-suite consists of our chief marketing, chief executive, and chief financial officer. And so each of those people are in charge of a specific sect of the company. CMO, of course, is in charge of marketing, CFO in charge of financials, and the CEO in charge of the operation of the whole business. Including this on the business plan is important because it just establishes credibility, shows where they're at, where they're coming from, what the C-suite has been doing. But in terms of not necessarily the business plan, but the actual organizational structure of the company, they're incredibly crucial for ensuring that as I like to say, the gears are well greased in the machine, in the nonprofit machine. To make sure that the day-to-day operations go smoothly and that everything is getting done on time and up to the quality of the standards set by the board.
Now let me ask, as you wrap up this business plan, the strategy for implementing this, obviously you're meeting with everyone in the organization, your board members and your chief executives and things like that. Did your strategy develop I want to say its own piece of paper, but do you have a strategy plan, or is that included in here, or is it kind of something you drew out with each program, that implementing this program and developing the strategy, the outreach and all that actually the boots on the ground part? when does that come into this? Maybe not in this business plan, but when does that get initiated?
So you're asking when our strategic plan is physically implemented, or when it is drafted and created?
I guess a little bit of both. So the strategic plan, you have strategy in here, but this isn't a strategic plan. So that gets drafted, but you're also implementing it almost side by side, I'd imagine, especially as a startup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry.
We'll go ahead and we'll finish up with this, and then we'll move on to a bit of your strategy. But then we have to I really want to get to that credibility part.
Okay.
Because even with all this, which is great and beyond what many nonprofits do, when you're going directly to provide your services, nonprofits run across that kind of hurdle. But anyways, go ahead and wrap up this part.
No, so for us, getting that strategic plan implemented was something that, as a startup, especially a student-ran startup, it came on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. What we would do is we would assess where we're at now, come up with a strategic plan, and roll with it until a new idea came about, or a new hurdle, we faced a new hurdle, and then we would change that on an as-needed basis. And as you can see, going over these documents, being incredibly new to the business world, being a very new startup, a lot of this stuff is very fluid. The business plan and our financials, I believe this is actually the fourth time that we've redone the finances. All this stuff is very fluid, and that goes back to our strategic plan. The way we implement and the way we do things will and has been remaining fluid. It should remain fluid for the startup stages at least, and I'm okay with it remaining fluid for the next few months, just because the nature of a startup is things change, plans change, employees will come, will go. And the situation, the circumstances that you're surrounded by, those will change as well.
Let's go on then with you have your business plan done, and you're moving into the implementation of this, and you're going out into the community with an idea that's really fresh, right? Like these people, you're introducing something that's new to the community. How did you guys go about doing that? Like you're a new nonprofit in a new community.
All right, Steve, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen.
Cool. Yeah, I'm messing with some buttons over here too. I'm going to put us back in that view. All right, cool. Now we're side by side. Cool. Yeah. So, how's that work? You're brand new. I know when I started mine here, I actually moved cities when I started my nonprofit, and so now no one even knew who I was, and if I said I was from where I came from, it wasn't even in the city, so the people couldn't even identify that was a good organization to be from because they didn't know what it was. Now you're brand new, and you're high school students, right? So how you have these plans and all the paperwork and documents in place. Do you have a plan for this, and how do you go about doing that?
So for Jee Foods, what we primarily focused on was just getting out in the community, being active, not only with volunteering and helping out those in the community, but also getting our name out there, marketing our ideas, and getting it around. This will tie back into the establishing credibility aspect. But what we did was we focused on ways of marketing that didn't require a ton of funding. So getting press releases written about us, being a student-ran nonprofit, something that's not really heard of that often. There were area newspapers who were willing to include articles about us in their newspaper, starting on social media and getting our name out there. So we have a Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. That's a free way to market yourself, get yourself out in the community. And I'd like to say that our biggest way of getting out and implementing what Jee Foods plans on doing is we volunteered to organize and run a community fundraiser at our high school. And so being high school students, the opportunity was ripe for us to take the opportunity, or to take the fundraiser. But what we did was we operated, it's called Taste of Ross, and it's the day before spring break. What we did was we organized and ran it, and we brought in a bunch of area food companies, and we were actually able to showcase some of our own products to the high school student body as well as some of the faculty there. And so that was just how we were able to get our footing in terms of marketing, in terms of getting our name out there.
Right. And I like how you're taking advantage of what you have already. You already have kind of a built-in audience. You have resources at your high school, and you have ways to get information out. I know, and a place to meet, to get people to meet at. And I like the idea also, and this is important for startup nonprofits, because a lot of us we're not doing redundant services, but we're doing similar services to other, feeding hungry people, serving people with disabilities, working with homeless pets, right? Finding that unique aspect and addressing it to the media who are going to be able to grab onto that. So a student-run nonprofit, that's a story, right? So if you can find that about your organization, then and get it out to the press, that's going to give you some press. And so that was a very smart idea to have that angle, and I'm sure the press jumped on that.
Absolutely.
So cool. So you're getting out there a little bit. There's more to this, right? You have more of a marketing plan going on and other things going on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I hope you don't mind. I have some of the points that I wanted to mention up just next to me, so I'm not just messing around.
Yeah, no worries. I'm looking off screen too. I got a couple screens up here. I'm taking notes on the left. My head's going back and forth. But yeah, we're gaining credibility. So what else are you doing as a part of that marketing?
So what we did was, being low on funding and low on fiscal resources, but we made sure that we took full advantage of business cards and brochures and other printed paper advertisements. Some of the social medias, like I mentioned, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Being a student-run nonprofit, that really helped us reach our younger audience, as well as our LinkedIn, which helped us connect with professionals around the Cincinnati area. The press releases, we got three press releases. We have a local one, the Venice Cornerstone, which services around 2,000 people around us, the Hamilton Journal, which is the city of Hamilton, and the Cincinnati Enquirer, which is the newspaper for the city of Cincinnati, which circulates around 165,000 viewers. And that, as well as establishing ourselves as a Google business, that's just something that we sort of did just to, if you were to search Jee Foods, Hamilton, Ohio, you'd be able to see on the right side of your screen the Google business with our hours, our website, our contact information, as well as another form of marketing that we touched on was our website. How to create a good nonprofit website. I believe, Steve, you have a video on that. I saw it on your website. So the details surrounding that are on that video. But having a good website is always something that any company should have, regardless of whether you're for-profit, nonprofit, or your company purpose.
Yeah, I like this. This is a lot of important establishing stuff for a nonprofit, for a business in general, but get that low-hanging fruit, your brochures, your business cards, your website, your social media presence, your press release. You're talking a couple $100, you can have all of this. It only takes time, right?
Yeah.
So, and then someone does a search for you and they see you have a Google business listing, you have a website, and you have ways to contact you and professional email addresses. Right away, you've established, and I actually have a bit on my website on this, on how to, it's about establishing that credibility part, like how to get found in Google and how to build that base so that you get your email address and your business cards and all that. That's really important. And it's amazing that a lot of people just don't have all of that. But it is good. The other thing too, I don't know if you've done this, is to make sure your business card, your brochure, your website, all that have a similar look and feel. Like get that logo going so it's all consistent. You put a letterhead on a Word doc. This is all easy stuff to do, but it's seamless and it gives that professional look. Well, cool. That's great. Let's go ahead and keep going through this then. And we went through the press releases and some of the digital presence that you have. Now you have this platform, right? You've got your business plan in hand. You've got your idea in hand. You've at this point, we didn't go over your bylaws, and we won't do that right now. But you've had your bylaws probably written, going through the 501c process. now you have to, now you got to be your boots. Now you got to do this, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
first step in that, like funding, right, and getting the
Mhm.
programs and all that. So how's that done then?
So for establishing credibility when it comes to our finances, especially with getting money from donors and grant writers or grantees, um, one of the things that we like to do is establish those appropriate community connections. So, like we said earlier, the Hamilton Community Foundation, we applied for 2 grants associated with them, partnering with your local SBA. They have resources. They have countless resources for small businesses looking to get started. As far as establishing actual credibility, what I've come to learn is that actually applying for grants, getting your name out there, seeing that you're interested in getting funding for your company, that is the credibility itself. If you see a small startup who isn't interested in funding themselves, um, then they're not interested in their company mission. Without funding, companies can't really get off the ground. And to see that companies actively participating in ways to get that funding, that's crucial for establishing their credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
How did you do that? How did you participate actively? Like, how does that look?
So for us, every day, what we do is we meet every day after school from around 2 to 4 p.m. And in for our financial team, we have a group of about 5 to 6 students that are specifically dedicated to writing grants. And what we structured is we structure it so that it's designed to get a grant written per person done per week. And so a lot of grants, they seem intimidating and they seem like something that you'd have to spend a month on or an extended amount of time on, not necessarily a month, but they're not at all. A group of high school students can get 5 or 6 done in a week very easily and done thoroughly too, done thoroughly and done well. I believe not necessarily guaranteed funding, but I'm 95% certain we're about to get a $5,000 grant specifically for our operations. And that's just coming from the grant, the written grant that we submitted, not anything other than that. And yeah, that's as far as grant writing and getting funding. That's all I've got to say on that part.
Cool. And so now you have these kids dedicated to that. And what other things are you doing fiscally then?
So as I showed earlier, the projected finances. I know that Google sheet wasn't most aesthetically pleasing. I didn't have a copy of we have a formal balance sheet out, but it's not on the drive, so I wasn't able to get my hands on that right now. But having those projected finances and knowing them is incredibly important. If I were going to present on Jee Foods' behalf for a grant and someone asked me, can you give me your projected net income for the year 2020? And I didn't say around $3,500, then that just tears up my credibility. Establishing and displaying a clear path towards profitability, and specifically for nonprofit, sustainability, not necessarily in the environmental aspect of sustainability, but getting that income enough so that nonprofit is able to sustain itself in the long term. If you can display that your company is going to be sustainable 5-10 years down the road, what donor or what investor would be excited about investing in something that's just going to be a dud 3-4 years from now? And I know this one sort of seems like a no-brainer, but establishing credible banking, for the longest time we weren't able to get a bank just because we were students, and so it took a lot of searching to find a bank that would actually bank with us, bank with minors, especially high schoolers. And so once we had that established, we were able to do a lot more professional things in terms of getting donations to our banks instead of dealing with physical cash. That's something that also establishes some credibility. And I don't think that a lot of the viewers will be encountering that just because they're not in the position that I'm in. But again, having that banking is something important to have.
Well, one of the things that we talk about we have a nonprofit, how to start a nonprofit course, and banking is in there. It's one of the things you should have set up. And it's for adults, it is a little easier, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's a corporation. So you have to have your EINs and you have to have officers in there, all this kind of, it is not as easy as getting a personal bank account. So it does take some doing, and people do skip it. And I recommend getting that while you're in the process of getting your 501c3, get that bank account. So good thing that you guys established that. I'm glad I can imagine the difficulties of being underage and trying to get some of the stuff you're trying to do here.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're presenting actually to grantors and possibly trying to get money from agencies and organizations. The idea of being prepared, so when they ask you a question about 5 years out or 3 years out, you know these numbers. I think that's really important. You guys definitely did your research. Now, with you personally, then you're a young guy. So what kind of things did you meet with that, or did you not meet with any difficulty there?
So do you mean in terms of
Being a student-run organization, how do we, as people giving you money, know you're going to follow through on this? What happens after you graduate? Like all the concerns that they would have with someone like that. How are you addressing these concerns?
Okay, so when we present, I have a team of about 3 or 4 students that will come with me, and they represent each subgroup or a different aspect of the company. But what we do is we really like to emphasize, our passion for what we're doing. We don't have any control over the fact that we're in high school or our age, but we are able to display how driven we are and how much passion we show for our goals. That's something that everyone should have. If you're a nonprofit especially, and you're trying to get money, and someone who is going to be administering the grant and reviewing it, and they don't see that you're driven, that you want to serve your purpose, they're not going to give you that money. After I presented at the Hamilton Community Foundation, I applied for one of their grants, and I presented there, and I actually had one of the grant reviewees. They commented on my enthusiasm and determination, and that was something that sort of lit a spark, and sort of showed that for me in a real example of that. Another thing that we focus on is just having the details nailed down to the T, knowing the ins and outs of the company. Not just myself or the other members in the C-suite, but everyone in the company needs to know the ins and outs, the inner workings, the finances, the marketing, the strategic plan, the bylaws, company goals, mission, all that, A to Z. Everything that the company can or will do, everyone needs to be familiar with, just because anyone can be asked anything, especially when you're presenting something. And if you get caught like a deer in headlights, that's not going to look good on your behalf or the behalf of the company.
So be prepared too when you go into there, because you get your stuff together and just be prepared to answer all their questions. If you do get caught in the deer in the headlights, just I've never really had to present when I have to get my grants. It's usually just forms and you do it online and stuff like that. But if something's missing, you can always go back to them and be like, hey, if you get caught in the deer in the headlights, we don't have the information right now, but I will get back to you on that. And then make sure you do, because then that establishes your credibility. If you never get back to them on them, then your application goes away.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get back to them on it, they're like, oh, well, they're into this. They're serious. That helps too. Hey, we're running a little bit short on time here. We're almost to the end. But what I want to do here is what was the biggest challenge outside of, I imagine, age and things like that? It has something completely out of your control. But in general, as a nonprofit, what do you find is your biggest struggle right now starting up, your biggest challenges, and what are you doing to address it?
So for us, I'd like to say we have two big challenges that we're facing. One being getting that solid, steady income, and 2, having a steady flow of employees, quality employees nonetheless. So with our finances, we were in a position where we were looking everywhere for writing grants, finding community fundraisers, anyone that would donate to us, and we weren't getting anything with that. And we just had to bite the bullet and just keep searching and keep trying to find people, even though on a weekly basis we would get we're sorry, but your grant request cannot be funded at this time. Some of our biggest funding, like I mentioned earlier, the Taste of Ross fundraiser at the high school, That was huge for us. We were able to get a lot of funding, find financing for our 1023, and all the paperwork was taken care of as far as establishing ourselves. But going back, you just gotta keep going. You have to remind yourself of why you're there, your purpose, why the company is established, and just keep doing what you're doing, applying for grants, looking for community resources, and that stuff. As far as the employees are concerned, being a high school nonprofit, summer months are not fun. I've gotten a few letters of resignation just because students aren't determined and driven. And being the leader of this company, that's something that I've come to accept, that there are going to be people that don't care about what I'm trying to do or what we're trying to do as much as I do. And the way that I have come to address that is understand that you, regardless of how much you try, can't change the opinions of some people. And that at the end of the day, you're the man with the mission. You're the one that's got to get it done. You're the one that has to make sure that company survives, and you're in charge of making sure that your air quotes child of a company survives, and that your mission continues to grow and spread.
Yeah, never truer words spoken. For people who are executive directors or founders of their own nonprofit, it's on your shoulders for the first few years until you really get a board going and some staff or volunteers that can really help you out on it. So before we wrap up, I'd love to, well, one, let's make sure people know where to find you and how to contact you. But two, it sounds like you are operational. So maybe you can tell us a bit about what you're doing and how you're serving your mission.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were very excited with Taste of Ross. What we were able to do is we were able to serve over, I believe it was over 950 meals to students, and about 20% of those students were the low-income students at our high school. And so that was something that we were very excited about. We were able to get some real statistics, some real operation going on, sort of established. Hey, have you done anything? Yes, we have. Answer that sort of question. We weren't able to use all the food that we had, so we had made. So what we did was we went out. It was on a Friday. We went out that next Saturday, and we went and sort of gave some out to those that were hungry. And that was sort of, aside from what we plan on doing day to day, that was sort of we didn't have enough people to consume the food, and so we gave it away. But we do plan on providing low-cost meals instead of our free alternative. That's another story to address. But yeah, getting those statistics, the real operations, that was a huge step for us. That's another thing with establishing credibility. If you have nothing to say for yourself, nothing to show on paper that you've served X amount of meals, helped provided X amount of servings, X amount of calories, then that's something that people will find to be not credible.
Yeah, and it helps you also. That tracking and all that stuff just helps you get your systems in place too, so you can realize, oh, we're missing this, or we didn't need that, or that worked out really well, and get those numbers going. You got to start somewhere, and part of it is just getting started. Well, cool. So how do we get in touch with you? And again, maybe mention that website again.
Yeah, so absolutely. Our website is jeefoods.com. Our LinkedIn is Jee Foods, Facebook Jee Foods. Instagram is jee.foods, and Twitter is @jeefoods. I'm available. My business email is mrivera, so MRIVERA @jeefoods.com. I check that regularly, so if you need to contact me, don't hesitate to ask. That's as far as and we have contact information and other ways to contact us through our website as well.
All right. Well, hey, it was awesome talking to you guys. Definitely have your stuff together going on there. And I'd love to check in with you, maybe see where you're at in a year or so. You'll be a senior, most likely still associated with the organization?
Absolutely.
Well, make sure we get in touch before you head off to wherever you do next. And I'd love to see how this is progressing. And make sure also that when you get your 501c3, put it in that the Got It form on Nonprofit Ally /Got It. We'll give you a shout out on there so that everyone knows that you've got your official 501c3 status. Hey, Michael, it's really great talking to you. Thanks so much for being available.
Thank you, Steve, for having me on.